Hey everybody, and welcome to Let's Look at a story about my uncle. No, it's not about the time he drank a 12-pack of beer in the hot summer sun and then hit me. That's a terrible thing to joke about. I apologize. Also, all of my uncles, great people, if there's a policeman asking. In any case, a story about my uncle came out last week on Steam. It is a first-person platform puzzle adventure game. It's not quite I hesitate to call it a puzzle platformer, because it's not really. The puzzles that you're getting involved with are exclusively, at least what I've seen so far in the 45 minutes I've played, jumping puzzles. So you're not hitting switches, you're not manipulating physics, except for the physics of, gravity and momentum and stuff like that. It has a little bit of a bedroom story, or a bedtime story. Bedroom story is something totally different. A different story about somebody else's uncle. And it's a bedtime story kind of veneer wrapped around this game. That works most of the time. I played about, again, 45 minutes, 50 minutes so far. I've gotten what seems to be about 40% of the way through the game. It seems like this is about a 2-hour-long campaign, according to other Steam reviews. So I feel like it's a good time to show it off, and we're going to play through the opening, which will be a little tutorialization, and then we'll get a little freedom. It's a very linear game, but we'll start with just a little bit of the actual story of the game here. So I'm going to click New Game. It'll overwrite my previous save, not multiple save files. Oh well. With a game this short, it probably doesn't matter that much. And I actually am going to take a second here to just crank up the volume during this cutscene so that you can actually hear the voice work that is done in the game, because it is fully voiced.
Dad?
Aren't you sleeping yet? It's time for bed, honey.
Dad, I can't sleep. Can you tell me a bedtime story?
All right. What do you want to hear?
Something about an adventure.
I think I know just the thing. When I was your age, my biggest dream was to follow my Uncle Fred on one of his adventures around the world. One day, he disappeared.
Alright, so there is going to be some more dialogue here, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a feel for, how the voice work actually is. The story is a major focus of the game. It's alright. I haven't really found myself as into the story as I am in some other games. The voice work is a little bit amateurish, which is okay because it kind of lends it a little bit of an authentic feel. But yeah, it does seem a little stilted sometimes, sometimes a little bit awkward. So I'm going to be playing on the PC controls here. This does have full controller support as well, but the PC controls are a little bit more intuitive, at least for me personally, for manipulating like a 3D space like this. I think it makes a little bit more sense. Basically, we are, I should point out, by the way, I think the game looks absolutely gorgeous as well, and you'll see a little bit more of that as we get involved in the environments, but we are playing as a nephew. I mean, most people, most males at least, are somebody's nephew, but our uncle in particular is significant because he travels the world, and we'll probably see a little bit more about that here. I guess the voice work is a little bit too quiet here for you to hear, and it's awkward for me to manipulate it at the same time. So basically, his uncle travels a lot. He's been to Kilimanjaro, Galapagos, Nepal, etc., etc., but this time he left without a word, and that's pretty wild. I feel like I can play GeoGuessr right here. Now, I am right there, roughly. I like how Alaska is enlisted as part of the United States of America. Dude really loves Galapagos. Anyway, and then I used to live there as well. How interesting. Looks like he hasn't been there. Maybe I can show Fred around sometime. Anyway, this is not Gone Home. It is from a company called Gone North Studios. But yeah, we don't explore our uncle's house for too often here. Instead, we get this power suit. And this is where the kind of Mirror's Edge or, to some extent, Portal comparisons might start to fly fast and furious here. Because this is a game where we're first-person platforming to a great deal. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Mag Runner as well, and I don't think I've really covered Mag Runner, but it was a Portal-like game where basically you used magnets instead of portals. But this is way more about just it's the Mirror's Edge comparison is a little bit more prescient, is what I'm trying to get at, because it is mostly about platforming, but there's not parkour. Instead, we'll have a variety of tools, and our power suit here will give us some extra advantages when it comes to actually traversing the environment. It's a very simple game once we actually get into it, and again, it's a very short game, so keep in mind this is, I think it's $11.50 for its opening week sale on Steam, which is 10% off, which means that it is going to be $13 normally. Are you the kind of person who's okay with paying $13 for a 2-hour experience? That came out as if it was like really derisive. Are you the kind of person that supports that kind of tripe? No, I don't mean it like that. Some of my favorite games for the past few years have been on the shorter side. Very much so, like last year, not to start this whole can of worms again, but I loved Gone Home. I probably played it for an hour and a half total. And that was it. One sitting beaten, and I think that the price of admission was well worth it there. If you're the kind of person, though, that really wants to get a bang for their buck in terms of, replay value and the length of a game and, the meat that's in a game, it's going to be probably a little bit more difficult for you to, find your money's worth here to some extent. And I don't tell that to do a disservice to the game, more to do a service to the people watching this video. You know who you are. If you're the kind of person who's not okay with $12 for 2 or 3 hours, then basically, wait for a sale or steer clear. But if you're the kind of person who's okay with that, let's move onwards then. So, we jump very high. It's an unrealistic height as a result of the fact that we have this power suit, and we're protected as long as we jump on land, but if we fall in the water, we die. There's your spikes, there's your lava, there's your super long fall, whatever you want to call it. That's how we get the "you died" screen from Dark Souls. Now, in addition to doing, like, super far sprints, we can use our power suit to give us super jumps and also super leaps, like this, or power jumps and power leaps. I don't know if super jump and super leap are maybe copywritten terms from somebody else, but basically, our uncle has a suit like this as well, and we're going to follow in his footsteps and hopefully find him at some point. I'm assuming that is probably what's going to happen around the end of the game. If you die, it's not a big deal. The checkpoints in the game are usually fairly close together, so oftentimes you... let's put it this way. Dying is merely an obstacle. It's not really an enormous deal in the whole scheme of things. Oh, that was terrible. You gotta choose whether to use like a power jump focused on distance or a power jump focused on height, and that was definitely the wrong choice for me right there. So it's got kind of a cool freedom of motion. It's weird to make this comparison, but people always talk about how Flambear has, Nuclear Throne, Luftrausers, Super Crate Box. Their games have such a good feeling of motion to them. I really appreciate that not comparison necessarily, but that compliment, because you know exactly what that means. When you play a Vlambear game, you know what it feels like. This is not a Vlambear game. That being said, it has kind of like a really satisfying feel of motion to it where, every step you take is really... I don't know, every jump you take, I should say, is really satisfying. I know that I just used the same word twice there, but forgive me. I actually am going to pause it for just a second here and up the volume. It strikes me that maybe the volume's a little low. I hate doing this stuff on the fly, but we will. Let's crank that up just a little bit there. There's not that much music. Most of it is just like ambient sound effects. But the sound effects do help you get into the game a little bit. So let's jump over here. It's very, very momentum focused. You don't really have a ton of control over yourself in the air for the most part. You kind of, it's almost like jumping in an old Castlevania game or something like that. Like, you have to basically nail it on your first try. You can influence yourself very slightly when you're in the air, but the more speed you get, the much harder it is to, slow yourself down, obviously. Now, this even, kind of interesting platforming. Oh, that was a terrible jump on my part. This isn't the main gimmick in A Story About My Uncle. If you've seen any of the game's marketing, you are, oh, that was terrible as well. Some patience would serve me well here. The main gimmick, or the main, novelty of the platforming in the game is that you have this grappling hook, and we'll get that pretty soon. Like I said, we're going to play through what I assume is about the first quarter of the game. Probably first fifth, because it took me about 20 minutes my first time through, and it seems like it's about a 2-hour-long game from what other people have told me. Jumped a little too far, but planked it and made it anyway, and these things represent checkpoints for me, which is lovely. So this may be our grappling hook. It is, okay. So, our grappling device allows us to basically do that. You've got a little bit of a Spider-Man type vibe going on here. We shoot electricity out of our hands. By shooting electricity out of our hands, that guides us to where we can grapple. And what's really neat about the game is that I think if they handled it improperly, this would be the easiest puzzle game of all time, and it would just feel like you're connecting the dots, right? And what I mean by that is, if your grappling hook could only attach to certain surfaces, the same way that your portal gun can only shoot at certain surfaces in Portal or something like that, or, in Mirror's Edge you could turn on the guides that would tell you basically where to do your parkour type tricks. I think that would be a huge mistake, but luckily the game has a huge sense of kind of like freedom and openness, despite being a linear, first-person adventure game like this, because we can grapple to pretty much anything. We can only do one grapple in the air at a time for now, but we'll get more power cores very quickly as time goes on, and we'll be able to have a little bit more complexity here. But let's start by doing that. And we have to play a little bit more around with physics now. We've got to pay attention to momentum and height and, the direction we're traveling when things happen and yada, yada, yada. So let's see if we can land on this platform effectively. And it really means, oh, that was close. It really means that when you land on one effectively, it feels like you've done something very, very right. It does also mean that it's really easy for you, if you mess up, to just kind of like point yourself at something and then, we want to get up there, I think. If you mess up, it's much easier to just kind of like point yourself at something and then you'll kind of land on it. But there are some pretty tricky puzzles in the game. What I mean by that, if you don't understand or if I didn't explain it properly, is that let's say you have like a little bit of extra battery power left and you kind of fucked up your first jump. Well, you just, teleport over to it. As long as you have battery power left, you're not gonna die. So let's try this one. There's a pretty, lenient range on this thing. Plus, keep in mind I am playing this for the second time. This area for the second time, and it's kind of the tutorial area of the game. So I just use that right now as kind of like an insurance policy to make sure that I actually don't mess up my jumps and can make it a little further. So yeah, I mean, the main point I'm trying to get across here by playing the game is that the sense of movement and the satisfaction of movement, that was really bad of me, are really good. It's a game that feels good to move around, and moving around is the focus, so it's very good that that is indeed the case. And we want to get up here, okay. I mean, there are some caveats to levy about it for sure. Again, I think it's kind of unfortunate to say because I know it's a focus, but the story of the game doesn't seem particularly strong so far. And the level design does, although there are different kind of environments, a lot of the level design seems to boil down to basically like floating rocks in the sky. That being said, it's been very satisfying to play, so I don't know if it's necessarily a slam dunk at $12. Not that I'm the kind of person who's normally, super anal about the price of a game versus its length, but I do think this is a lot of fun, and I think this is the kind of thing that if you're into games like Cube, or for example, to bring up another comparison in addition to the ones that I already mentioned before, you could find yourself having a really good time with this. Like, it's possible I may find myself finishing it. I actually, not to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. That was poor play on my part. Not to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but I actually appreciate shorter games for the most part. This is not me making an excuse for this game. It doesn't need it. It's good. But I oftentimes feel myself compelled to defend short games because there's this kind of overarching theme in games criticism that if this game's X amount of dollars, then it has to be X amount of hours. And I totally disagree with that, although I understand the reasons for why that kind of exists. Really, like a lot of my favorite games from recent years have been shorter games. Like, even a game like Mark of the Ninja, I'm just trying to figure out where I go here. Even a game like Mark of the Ninja, I love Mark of the Ninja. A lot of people would probably consider Mark of the Ninja relatively short. It's maybe like a 4 or 5 hour game. By the end of the game, I was finding myself almost thinking that it was, is this not the way we just came from? I do find myself getting turned around a little bit. Well, the arrow points in this direction, so let's go in this direction. But yeah, Mark of the Ninja, maybe 4 to 5 hours long. I found myself by the end of it kind of feeling like it overstays its welcome. And I find that with a lot of like AAA games as well, that seem like they're just kind of like padding out their content so that, video game reviewers are like, well, yeah, tick the box. It's not to insult games critics at all, because I'm guilty of this too a lot, but they, tick the box and say, like, well, it was $60, but it had 40 hours of gameplay, so that's okay. So a game that, is it's not fair to say, like, I prefer quality over quantity. That's a really derisive way of talking about it because everybody prefers quality. Like, nobody wants a long, shitty game. It's like that old analogy. This gives us 2 grapples, by the way. It's like that old, or not analogy, but that old anecdote of the, 2 ladies are having dinner in the restaurant, and the one lady turns to the other one and says, like, oh, yeah, like, the food here is terrible. And the other lady says, oh, it is, and such small portions. Like, if it's bad, why would you want more of it? But sometimes I do feel like that's kind of a pervasive thing. So that was a really roundabout way of me saying I am totally fine with the fact that the game is short, and it makes it more likely that I can fit it into what is not a super busy life, but any adult life has any life in general. Not to be insulting to people who are not adults, has a limited amount of time, and when games respect that, I appreciate that. It's when games leave you wanting a little bit more that the fact that it's short becomes a more relevant criticism, shall I say. But But I think that the fact that I just went on that tangent tells you something about my thoughts on a story about my uncle, and that's that they're pretty simple. This game, you know, it's easy to talk about. It's easy to get your opinions on it out pretty quickly because it's very solid. Very not likely to end up on, you know, my, oh god, what have I done here? My like end of the year list or anything like that. I can't believe I'm actually going to solve this puzzle despite not really understanding what I was doing to myself there. Oh, I got trapped in a rock, but I think I can get out. Okay, good. There also is, by the way, a restart from last checkpoint button. I haven't gotten myself stuck or glitched out or anything like that yet, but I appreciate that that's in there so we don't find ourselves, you know, getting stuck or anything like that. But yeah, basically what I'm trying to get at, it's a game that's very easy to like, and I'm sure a lot of people will love it. I might not necessarily be one of those people, but I do think it's quite solid, and at its price point, I think it's very reasonable. So I do sometimes get a little turned around here. One more thing I want to mention. Actually, there's a couple of things I want to mention. One is this puzzle where you grapple onto like moving, rotating rocks happens all the time. If there's one major complaint I can level about the game, and I kind of touched on it earlier, it's that the design. Sometimes you can find, you know, more story stuff over here, but the design can get a little samey. It's a lot of like floating rock islands, and you know, the distance between the islands gets further, but you get more grapples, and you know, the rocks themselves get smaller, so it's harder to land on them, and yada yada yada. But your skill should be better at that point, obviously, to compensate for it. So there's a lot of, you know, just kind of iterative puzzle design going on here, which is not the end of the world, but you know, I think I do kind of feel like I've seen what the game has to offer in terms of its gimmick and design at this point. I'm not reading that subtitle at the bottom, by the way, because I'm, you know, a scumbag, basically. I thought I was trying to put a little bit of a nicer spin on it, but scumbag is where I ended up on that one, and that's okay. I think we are approaching the end of the level here. I thought I had something else to say, but I forgot about it. And that's a-okay as well, because I think I've more or less said my piece on this game. What is crazy is that this is the first full release from these developers, which I think is nuts. And the other thing that I didn't want to mention until the very end is that this is published by Coffee Stain Studios, who people will know as the, you know, GOAT simulator studio now, but they also made Sanctum, Sanctum 2, Sanctum Tower, or Super Sanctum Tower Defense, which was a really cool tower defense game that came out a little bit over a year ago, I guess, at this point. Anyway, that's a story about my uncle. I'm not going to play any more of it on camera because I want to, you know, avoid spoiling a little bit because the story is a major focus. I am warm to the game. I'm mildly positive. Let's put it that way. I have almost nothing. If we were going to do like a Kotaku style, like plus and minus review here, I have almost nothing that would go in the negatives. Again, puzzles do feel a little samey after a little while. Game runs fine, haven't encountered any bugs. I think it looks really good. The other thing I'd put in the minus column is that the story hasn't really grabbed me. Voice acting a little amateurish, but again, I think that kind of lends it like a cool lo-fi vibe. Apart from that, it's solid. Again, it's something you've kind of seen before in this first-person puzzling or first-person adventure puzzle platformer genre, but it does it well, and it's a pretty stunning accomplishment for what I believe is the first game from the studio, and all in all, I'm positive on it. It's not a must-buy, but if you're a fan of the genre, I would strongly recommend that you pick it up. In any case, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode. There will be a link in the video description below to pick up a story about my uncle on Steam. Again, 11.50. I can actually just alt-tab here. I've got the store page up. It's 11.70 right now, which is 10% off. So I believe it's normally 13.50 then. I'm not totally sure. You can do the math there and see if I'm an idiot. In any case, again, I think I've said my piece on it. Check out the link on Steam if you want to pick it up for yourself. And, of course, if you enjoyed the video, I always appreciate it if you click the like button. It helps out a great deal. And subscribe if you want to see more first impressions in the future. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.